Build in Public series of 2026. And it's January 27th. It's 60-some degrees in Miami, which means that I put on a jacket on my walk today. It's Tuesday. So the thought behind this process is that I pop in every day and share a little about what I'm doing as I do it. And I've started it last year, and just share 3 things that I'm doing in my business. Yesterday, I put in a little bit of like a call to speak out about politics, and which might have seemed a little bit off topic, but an interesting thing did happen, which is that after I did that, my head felt much clearer and I was able to really concentrate more on the work that I wanted to do. So the 3 things I'm doing today are working on my editing backlog, because I have quite a bit of stuff that is backlogged. Working on new systems that need to be updated in my production schedule, because one of the tools I use or used in the past to produce the show is not working. And so it turns out that replacing that singular tool has been a little bit like painting one wall in a room or a house. It's just like everything else needs to be painted. All of a sudden everything needs to be updated. One thing specifically that is an example of that is that I have this like weekly group social meeting that I do online for female creators, and the registration for that is not working. So I need to figure that out. And I want to thank Candace for pointing out that that it didn't work. So it is really actually very helpful, and promoting the episode that went live today, which is a conversation with Lindsay Tague about digital nomadship. So in addition to clearing my head yesterday after I made that announcement, I am going to talk a little bit about a little bit of the pushback that I got, which is fine. And this is going to go a little longer than almost every live video I've probably ever done. I'm not actually a fragile person when it comes to posting things about my personal opinions. And when I put something out there, I actually know that people are going to push back, and I'm intentional when I choose to put commentary out there. But I am going to talk a little tiny bit about the problem with being silent as a strategy, as I see it, as I understand it. So here's the thinking behind it, right? If I don't tell you how I feel about something or how I think about something, what I'm actually doing is leaving it up to you to guess what my opinions on that might be. This is actually something that I studied in context of being better at doing the work that I do. Specifically where I studied this was when I was doing a lot of learning about family communications, group communications, high conflict, de-escalation type work. And wherever you are, you've probably experienced some of this in your life, right? So if you're in a book club and people are like, oh, why did Susie leave? You know, instead of asking Susie why she left, that's an example about that. If there's like drama between you and your kid's administration, you're like, why was Joey late to school, right? Anytime there's a vacuum of information, you're talking to other people about it, or you're not talking directly to the source, there can be a spot where people are put in a position where they guess. One of the other places we see this a lot is in the conversation about educating our children about intimacy and sex. So like if you don't educate your kids about it, one of the things that people say is your kids will probably go and learn that from any variety of other places. Their friends, online, TV, movies, magazines, games, whatever, right? And so I extend this out to my brand and my business communications, both as a business owner, as a creator, and as a consumer. I am happy to tell you about my personal views of the world if you ask, because I want you to know. I don't want you to guess. So I'm happy to tell you that I don't actually support the actions of the teams of ICE and DHS and Border Patrol in Minneapolis. I don't want you to guess how I feel about that. And if you don't agree with my positions, that's actually fine. Right? That's actually fine. You don't have to support my content. That's always been your choice. You just have more data about me now to make that. There is no version of the world that I live in where everybody agrees about everything all the time. And one of the comments that's been going around lately is, people who say things like, I wish for a time when things were simpler, right? That sounds like a really sweet thing to say, right? It sounds like really nice. But be careful, because sometimes people who say stuff like that are really just showing you that they represent a group of people that has been entitled by the established systems that benefit them, right? Because there's no historical time where the world was without conflict or everybody all got along. So I am a white woman. You can see that. I show up in this. I speak English. I have a college degree. I am aware that I have benefited from a lot of the systems in the country where I live that benefit me. I did not always know that. I was not always aware. I learned it. I was taught. And I learned that at the same time that I was benefiting those systems, those same things, those same policies and systems were in effect punishing and limiting other people. And when I became aware of that, when I began to learn that, I have done my best since then to continue to learn about those systems and do what I can to deconstruct them. I am not perfect, to the point that I put the word imperfect into my most recent brand. My voice did get louder when what's happening in the United States began to impact me directly, when I began to lose my rights as a woman over bodily autonomy, that my voice got louder. And it got louder again when the people who were being murdered in the streets began to look a lot more like me. I deserve to be criticized for that, and I welcome that criticism because I have thick skin and because I'm always looking for the lessons. But at this point in the country where I live, the United States of America, it's my opinion that we are actively involved in a battle over democracy and a group of individuals who would like to control the country with a more authoritarian regime. These are people that do not just want to be in an administration. And words matter when we talk about stuff like that. So I am not personally going to criticize people who are jumping on it's time to speak up wagon. That's not something I'm going to do, because that feels a little bit like to me, like criticizing people who show up on January 1st in the gym with a fitness routine, or criticizing people who come back to health initiatives or want to stop drinking or any of those things. That's just not a thing I do. And I feel like it is my opinion that this is a period where I really want all hands on deck. Even if you've never spoken up before, you could choose to speak up now. I will also honor the fact that speaking up does put you in the path to have people reply and comment back to you. It's not always a safe thing to do. Several years ago, I made a comment about a local politician, and that politician showed up at my door. I didn't even think it was going to be an important thing. I made a comment about a sign that I didn't want in my yard, and they came and showed up at my door. So I honor that there can be really actual, very true risk. But if you want to speak up and find a way to do that, I encourage you to do that. Within the last 24 hours, a lot of companies began to speak up. I think I can take full credit for that. Kidding, I don't think I can. I do think it's important because, in my opinion, the only force more powerful than politics in our country is the dollar, is the money moving around. I'm happy to see it. I said a second ago that I'm a business owner and a consumer. If you have a business and I cannot tell what your policies are, I am going to assume that you fully support the administration and the actions of the militarization and the violence that we're seeing in the street, gassing people, shooting people, unaliving people, all of that. If you don't tell me you're against it, I assume you're for it. This is tough to do with big corporations, and I totally am going to say that I don't get this right a lot. Like, I don't even know if I could, pull myself away from a company as big as Amazon. I feel like the entire world runs on their AWS platform. I don't even know if, really, I don't even know if it's possible. So I'm mostly talking about, things where we can piece it apart. Like, do I have a choice to shop at this store? Brands, which are very tightly tied to the individuals that work for them, and then people who are individuals coming out and saying, this is how I feel. It is my personal opinion at this point that we are actually beyond the point of polite discourse when it comes to this particular topic. If you are in fact against fascism and against people who work for and are paid with tax dollars shooting people openly on the street or tear gassing people who are exercising their First Amendment rights to assemble, then I would appreciate it if you would announce it clearly so that I know. If you don't, all that's left for me to do is guess. I'm going to mention the two main rebuttals that I'm seeing bouncing around online because I think that these are, they're repetitive. They're really, really repetitive. And that makes me think that they're not actually individual opinions, but more talking points that have been coached or instructed or indoctrinated into a certain audience. And so I'm going to share what these are, how they're showing up when I see them, and how I interpret them for myself. First is the one where people are defending the murderers by saying comply with law enforcement. Sounds like easy instruction. Generally speaking, if people are issuing instructions to follow the laws, it should be to keep people safe. But to me, in this moment, when people are saying this about the murderers who are shooting protesters who are speaking up for rights of Americans, I very directly translate that to I support the fascists. Because these people are not, in my opinion, enforcing the law, they're breaking it. Assembling to protest is not against the law. Assembling an armed militia is also not against the law. Those are the two first rights we gave ourselves as colonists back in the day. But murdering people is against the law. And these, to me, this is not a murky area of confusion, in my opinion. So when you say that to me, if you reply that to me, that what I hear is I support the fascists. I support the armed goons. And if that's not your intention when you say that, I invite you to think about what you're saying and the words you're using. And I also invite you to get curious about where they came from and maybe who said it to you when you heard it the first time. Because indoctrination is something that it looks like is really happening. And then anytime somebody says businesses should not be political, this is the other thing. Somebody write me back and say, I like you, but I don't like it when you talk politics. That's fine. You know, I would rather be talking about spaghetti sauce. I think to myself, oh, businesses shouldn't be political. Well, where do you live, right? Where do you live that businesses are not political? Do you live in that imaginary place where public schools that can't afford to buy crayons are, you know, performing expensive medical procedures without parental permission? Maybe. That's not a thing that really happens, by the way, and that's, you know, businesses are always political, in my opinion. So when you say that to me, just so you know what I hear is, please be quiet, because I'm comfortable and cozy benefiting from these systems of oppression, and it makes me uncomfortable when you bring it up. And it turns out that's not how I roll. But again, if that's not what you mean to say, when you say that, maybe choose different words, because words matter here. And the person who said this best, that I'll close with, is Audre Lorde, who has the very famous quote, your silence will not protect you. Go in peace. Thanks.